Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us again on another episode of Creators Anonymous, the podcast where we like to show you that there isn't just one way into the media production or creative industries out there, and that you can truly follow your dreams and your heart into the industry that you love. There's many different paths into making it into these jobs and into these career paths that, you know, not a lot of people think about, but everyone has a different story and a different road that they've walked. And that's what we're here to show. Today we are joined by filmmaker, writer, author, Daniel Hess. Daniel, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
No, of course, man. I'm really glad that you're on the podcast, and I think you have a very interesting story to tell, and I would love to, like share it with everyone. And you have, you know, some works under your belt that you've produced and created by yourself.
Mhm.
And I think that's really important for people to hear that you don't need some studio backing you. You don't need a corporate job. You don't need any of these things to tell you what to create. If you have a vision, you can go and create it, you know?
Exactly.
Um, yeah, no. And so Daniel, could you go ahead and tell us, what do you label yourself as most? Are you just a creative or a filmmaker or a writer? What do you see yourself as more often?
So for me, really, I mean, writing is my place. I do consider myself kind of a creator, but where I am most at home is when I'm sitting there, either with a script or trying to write a book or something like that. And then taking that and trying to get that to the next level it can be. So if I have a film script, it is trying to reach out to fellow producers, fellow creatives to try to make the thing happen. And when it comes to having a book, trying to just get it out there for people. So those are my two kind of like very artistic outlets. It's creating and then also trying to make it as big as it can possibly be from that point going forward.
And that's the dream. Just like,
Yep.
something you create, you really want it to get that traction and you really want it to get out to as many eyes as possible. And I
Hmm.
feel you on that. Well, I know that you did attend school. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Like, your story shows that you didn't start off as a film student, maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, growing up in kind of a smaller town, I never really even thought about anything creative wise. So, when I was finally getting into college and everything, I was actually originally going to go to school for pharmacy. And it was, film writing, none of that was there. And I had a very close friend at the time who was going into film, and that kind of last summer before between high school and college, we were kind of working on some projects together. He was just doing some, let's try to make some music video things for YouTube type of deals that year, or that summer. And it was just really exciting, really fun, really cool getting to see thoughts that I had on a page come to life. And so, kind of at the last second, I decided, you know what, like, let's just do this. And, kudos to my parents for kind of sitting back and letting me do that, because it was certainly an interesting conversation saying, I want to go from something, pharmacy wise that can pretty much have a pretty guaranteed income stream, jobs, all that stuff, to film, which no one in my family had ever attempted before. And there's no guarantee for any kind of financial security. But they stood with it. And that's what I ended up going to school for at Towson University here in Maryland. And, just really hit the ground running with it. And even when I was in college, that's sort of when I started things with Two Tony Productions and my own production company, and just trying to start building connections back then, which was around 2009.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. Yeah, like, the meds, they just weren't where the heart was. It's not where your heart was. And you gotta do what makes you happy at the end of the day. And I
Hmm.
applaud you for doing that. I honestly had a very similar route where I was in school for computer science, and
Mm.
I was there coding all day, in classes. And I was like, one day I just sat there and I was like, man, I don't think this is for me. Like,
Yeah.
I, don't, I don't think this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. And it's also one of those careers that have a very guaranteed like financial security behind it, because everything's
Hmm.
technology these days and you get picked up straight out of school for these types of jobs. And but it's not where I wanted to, see my life going. So it's awesome that
Exactly.
someone has had a similar experience as me and that you did go for it as well. And I can only applaud that. Um, well,
And same
for
here for you.
thank you, man. I
Of
appreciate that.
course.
uh I do want to know, like, this passion for film and writing and everything like that, was that something that you kind of found early on and just didn't act on, or was that something that, like, maybe in school and like in college you were like, oh, this is something I can see myself getting into? But was it an overtime spark, or was it just like one day you're like, yeah, I really love this?
I'd say it was definitely an overtime kind of spark that sort of grew. When I was real little, I always enjoyed watching the old like Godzilla movies. And as a kid, I would create my own like Godzilla versus this creature or, these little situations in my head. And then unfortunately, when I was around 10, my cousin and best friend passed away from cystic fibrosis. He was only 14, and it was like a huge kind of shock, obviously, going through that at such a young age. And so for me, that really started this slow like drift up into writing like poetry and to writing just anything to sort of have this like escapism from what I was dealing with in the real world with that whole situation, because we were so close growing up. And then as I got older, I just noticed it was always kind of there. And I just never had the confidence to try to do anything with it. Cause like I said, no one in my family had really had a creative background. It was always very like more blue collar, kind of go out there and make that guaranteed money and stuff like that. So yeah, it was really just being able to have that experience with my friend and kind of seeing that what I could write could come to life, and there was different avenues for what that could mean. And that finally gave me like that last big push of confidence into it. And that's something that even kind of ebbed and flowed like after I got out of college and was in the back in the real world again. Um, so it's definitely been one of those things where it's been a long journey that I feel like was always there, but has finally come full circle to the place where I'm at now with it.
Perfect. Yeah, no. So yeah, you know, you had the interest, it just wasn't probably strong enough yet. It just wasn't your time
Hmm.
to make the moves for it. But you are where you are now, and that's awesome.
Yep.
You really followed your path. Were were there any points where, like, let's say, it after you made the change to switching to like film in college, were there any points where you doubted the decision, where you're like, should I have really done this, or should I have stayed in pharmacology? Were there any points that you thought about turning back?
Oh, I mean, there wasn't really much of that in college. It was really that stuff didn't really start to come into fruition until I kind of graduated and was out into the real world where all of a sudden it became kind of tight for money and things like that. And there's real struggles because, I moved out from my parents' place fairly young, really at the behest of the relationship I was in at the time. And it went from, pretty laid back, no rent due, none of that, to okay, now I have to pay this month a month. I have to support this person. I have to make sure this is there. And it was like, oh crap, I have to really make this amount of money each month. And that really wasn't there because creatively it was great. Like I was in a really good place creatively when I left college and had some really good traction that really I had to kind of step away from just because I had to make money. And, that just wasn't the thing that was going to happen with that creative side of it at the time. And so like that was when the doubt started really creeping in, because it was like, man, that people were right. Like, yeah, I'm not really making that much money here doing this, and I am kind of really having to do things that are in the same wheelhouse, but they're not exactly, creative endeavors here, like things like filming bands at concerts and filming weddings and stuff like that. Like, it was stuff that was getting there, but it really wasn't where the passion was lying. So it was really tough there for a while, for about, a good little bit, before I finally kind of came back around to having a balance of being able to be creative, but then also making enough that I could just, you know, be supported and not have to worry as much for the financial side of things. But yeah, I was definitely a little bit egotistical and a little arrogant in college. I'm not gonna lie. I had a big head. I thought I had it all figured out. And I didn't. That was the thing. I got out in the real world and I was like, man, I am nowhere near where I thought I was with this stuff.
It's a bit of a shock sometimes, huh? Like a shock to the system.
Uh-huh. Certainly
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, no, but like that's part of it. Honestly, it's
Mhm.
filmmaking and writing, like any other art, is it takes time, because you're not gonna make your first film or make your first painting and then someone's gonna be like, I love it, I'll pay, a crazy amount for it. It doesn't work that way. So you gotta, like, hone your skills. You build up over time. And sometimes to
Mhm.
survive, you gotta do those corporate gigs. You gotta do like weddings, and like you said, music videos, filming a band or something. You gotta take out those, like, do little ads for people, and you gotta just do those jobs. But it's all worth it at the end, because you're still doing something in the realm of what you love.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
It's
just it's just not the exact thing.
it's interesting because it's like, while I might say that in more of like a almost a complaint form, I'll still talk to people and they'll be like, "Yeah, but you like get to go to these different places all the time and you get to meet these different people." And I'm just like, "Yeah, you're right. I'm not like still going into an office every day and stuff like that." So it's like it's always funny when you kind of like take a step back and look at it, because it's like, while it might not be the exact thing you want to do, it still does kind of beat those other gigs where it's, I'm not in front of a computer all day. I'm not in a cubicle. I am out on the road and exploring and meeting people. And even on the corporate side, sometimes you'll get to go to like some pretty cool spots, that most people don't get to see, because, it's just for that company and they sort of have things under lock and key. Um, so yeah, so you're exactly right. But, I think when you're in those moments and you're just like telling yourself, man, I should be making films and stuff, it can be
Yeah.
very easy to be like, God, this isn't it. This isn't it at all.
No, yeah, no, it's not always the ideal situation, but it's far from unideal.
Exactly.
Like, you're not in a 9 to 5. Got to wear a button down, go to work, and then
Hmm.
punch in, punch out type stuff. So at least that's the silver lining to it. But I
Yeah.
completely understand where you're coming from, where I would rather be doing
Yep.
films and writing all day. So yeah, no, I've been there. I feel that 100%. But I do know that, you've said that you've done a lot of those odd jobs, those corporate events, weddings, and done like filming people's bands or events. Out of all of those, all of the jobs that you've done, which one's the best and which has been kind of the worst kind of job? Or weddings, like, oh, they're really fun, because I hear mixed reviews. I hear people say, oh, I love shooting weddings, they're awesome, sharing that moment with the couple and everything, and the events are beautiful. And then I hear people like, weddings are horrible, I can't stand them, the brides are complete, like messes, and it's just a bad experience. What would you say, out of all the ones you've done, which one's the best and worst?
Well, I think I'm not hiding anything when I say that weddings are probably the worst. Honestly, um, it's not so much that. Well, I mean, it is kind of a mess. Like, that's kind of the first thing, and the other thing is just it's such a long day. It's like being on set where you're making a movie. Those are long days too, but at least there's like a semblance of a little bit of control. Whereas, like with a wedding, you're just really at the mercy of like however it's scheduled, however they plan to like give everybody food, the amount of time that you have to sit there and eat the food. Like I couldn't tell you how many times I've been at weddings and it's like I got 2 minutes to scarf down this plate of food and then I got to jump right back out there. And you're just monitoring multiple cameras, you're monitoring audio feeds, especially when you're just at those lower budget weddings where they don't have enough to have another videographer and it's just you running the whole day solo. I mean, goodness, I've done so many of those over the years that it's a lot. So that's definitely for me, probably worst filming case scenarios over the years. The ones that I've had the most fun on, more than likely, it's usually the music videos are cool. I had like a couple experiences over the years of different like interesting shoots. Like I did one with I can't remember his name, but it was like a country music star guy down in like Tennessee, or no, it was in Georgia, and it was on his estate. And I mean, he just had this huge estate, and we were just hanging out with him all day at his like crazy mansion, and that was really cool. And then there's one shoot I did that was at Travis Pastrana's house here in Maryland,
Oh,
which is
snap.
yeah, which was really, really awesome. We were in his like garage, which was basically like its own entity. He had the whole like big ball pit that you could have in there and stuff. And it was just really cool. And he was a really nice guy. Um, and I remember actually the week before I did that shoot, the other cool one I did was I was at the Virgin Mobile Free Fest when they used to do that here in Maryland. And I was with the team that was hired out by Virgin exclusively. So while I didn't get to meet him, they actually did an interview with Richard Branson that day, who was at the Free Fest. And I was the DIT. So I was the one bringing all the footage in and making sure it all got on the different hard drives and stuff like that. And that was like 2013. So that was like right around when red cameras were like coming into their own.
uh
And that's what we had that weekend. So it was just like, whoa, there's the red cam and stuff, and they're using it. So yeah, so those have been like the really cool ones, but those are the ones that have always been like the most furthest and farthest in between over the years. The weddings are always the ones that have been like the most consistent of everything. But like I said, they're just brutal, brutal, brutal days.
yeah, it's hard work, man. And yeah, I can imagine that the events, or like the cool situations, like they gotta be spread out. You can't be living the life, day after day. It's a little much. But no, I completely agree with you. I would rank them the same way. Um, but I know, Daniel, I know you have a production company, right?
hmm
And I wanted to ask because the name is Two Tony. Is that an homage to your friend, your cousin that passed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I was in college, it was like, I saw people, forming their own little companies and having names, and it was always like their name or some offshoot of like their name. And I was just like, no, I really didn't want it to have that kind of a, I guess, shallow approach to it in a sense. So yeah, it was, two Tony is like four Tony. And that's kind of something I always wanted to have to remind me of like the lessons that he had taught me over the years, and to try to keep that same like creative passion in the back of my head no matter what I was like doing in the industry. And it was always just like that reminder to try to push myself a little bit further into that creative space that I've been trying to get into all these years. So yeah, so it's definitely an homage and like a representation of his legacy that he left. And not to forget the memory of everything that we kind of went through growing up.
Well, that's beautiful. You made something to commemorate him, and I
Mhm.
think that's great. And the message behind it is pretty freaking wholesome. I gotta say,
Thank
it's
you.
great. Yeah, I actually went on. I saw the films that you have there. I was thoroughly entertained. You
Thank you.
know, uh, is there anything that you're working on now that we should look out for in the future, like film wise?
Yeah, so there's a couple projects right now that are really in the early stages of like getting off the ground. There's 2 feature films that are currently like fully scripted out, completed, and I'm actively working with a few producers on. Right now, it's really just about securing either a studio to kind of back these projects or going the independent financing route with like financiers and executive producers and stuff. But that's sort of where those stages are at. And then I have 2 other films that I have to get on to writing because they are both pretty much greenlit to go. They just have to have scripts now. So it's really kind of been the opposite, where it's just like I have these 2 projects that are done and I'm really like fighting for to get made, and they're getting in that direction. And then I have these 2 that are pretty much a sure thing to get into production. I just have to take my time and write 2 more feature film scripts. So that's about all I feel like I can kind of say for now with those projects. But yeah, hopefully all of those will be into production in the next 2 years or so, and then be out in the world sometime after that, whether that be independently after a nice festival run or through some kind of studio acquisition. We'll just have to kind of wait and see, because there's been a lot of good feedback on the 2 scripts that are done. But they're just projects that are in those genres and realms that are just not making it easy. One is kind of intended to have an animation background to it, and the other one is kind of a period piece to it. So it's just like, for everyone that I've talked to and all the advice I've gotten over the years, it's like, yeah, you're not making anything easier on yourself by trying to get an independent animated thing off the ground and a period piece off the ground that's independent. So it'll be a challenge, but like I said, it's definitely getting there slowly but surely.
Yeah, no, and look, all the best payouts, all the best rewards, they come from challenges and adversity.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna go out there. It's gonna be tough. You're gonna sweat and be tired all over your film. It's not gonna be an easy feat, and you're gonna get it done. And because like I thoroughly believe you will, and
Thank you.
it's gonna pay off. It's gonna be dope. Don't worry.
Yeah,
You
like I
know,
said, it's just, it's interesting because it's, it's one of those things where it's like I've heard it over the years a ton, and I'm sure you have, and everything, where it's like you'll meet people and they're like, I have this project or that project, and it's, you know, a lot of people think that like it's just one of those things that just it's this magic lottery that you just get picked. And it's like, no, this is just, it's just like anything else. It's hours and hours and hours of outreach, of trying to connect the dots, trying to get people to get behind it and show them why they should get behind it. And it can happen. It's just that you have to just keep pushing and pushing and pushing, because nobody's going to make it happen except for you. And there isn't going to be some magical, like Fox isn't here. That's a bad example because Fox isn't even a thing anymore. Disney is not going to just call me up one day and say, hey, Dan, what do you got for us? We're going to give you $1 million for it, because it just doesn't work that way. It's me banging at the door 24/7.
it's completely true, and I completely agree. A lot of people don't realize that it's lots of hard work that goes into these, and it's also a numbers game
Mm-hmm.
where let's say you put out 4 films, one, if you're lucky, one gets picked up, and that's awesome. Writers write 10 scripts and don't see any luck, and they could be very skilled writers and they don't see any luck. It's a numbers game. You got to keep at it, you got to keep going. But in the long run, when you do, like, hit that mark, you do like reach that goal, it's well worth it. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people, they start on a project also when they realize how hard it is. The project goes into purgatory, like it just sits there.
Yep.
It's either oh, they wrote it and then they realize how hard it is to actually go ahead and get everyone together to film it, or they wrote it and it's just not turning out well, so they're like, I'll just leave it like that. Or they filmed it and then it sits in that purgatory between like filming and then post-production, where you don't touch it for years and like you just don't do anything with it.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people don't realize how hard it is. But that's not to discourage anyone, anyone listening. Like, don't be discouraged by that. It's gonna be hard, but nothing in life that's worth it is easy. You're not gonna find anything that satisfies, like, what you really want with it just being handed to you, or it's easy. Some help is appreciated,
Oh
but
yeah.
yeah, always, but it's not gonna be just it's not gonna be an easy trek, and this industry is not. But if it's something you're passionate about, it's well worth it. If it's something that you love just being a creator, or you love being in the production media or creative industries in general, it is worth it. And it might not seem so sometimes, because things do get hard. How we were talking about financially, things do get hard sometimes as an artist. That's why struggling artists, and starving artists are terms, because
Mm-hmm.
you just get you, you have to sacrifice certain things for the art, and to make it come true. And sometimes you have to work those odd jobs, or you have to work corporate jobs, just to kind of see it through. But in the long run, it's going to be well worth it. And I don't guarantee a lot of things, but I'm going to guarantee that it's going to be well worth it in the long run. But
Yeah.
yeah, uh but I'm super hyped to go ahead, and whenever you do get those things rolling, or anything, shoot me a message. I'm super hyped to give them a watch, or, like, support in any way that I can,
Of course.
because I'm a big film lover. I also know that you wrote a book on poetry, right?
Yeah.
You do have it up on your site. Could you tell us something about that?
Yeah. So over the years, really a lot of the time that was spent in that sort of not great mindset, where I was doing a lot of weddings and corporate things. I was writing a lot of poetry, and it just kind of kept growing. Like I would just have these moments where I would just have like this flash, and I would want to write something, and I would have my phone and just write it down on the notepad app. And then just they just kept piling up and piling up. And finally, when it came time, like, when the pandemic hit and there was all this extra time and everything, I kind of realized, like, I have all these years of poetry, like 5, 6 years of poetry all on this phone. What else am I doing with it? I should try to put this into something. And I just started researching, how to put together a book, what to do for the formatting and things like that, and just kind of put it all together, and then just put it out there, like, pretty much sight unseen. Like, I didn't go into it with any knowledge of, like, building up any hype around it or anything. I just sort of plopped it on Amazon one day and just started letting people know about it. And it's not like it sold gangbusters or anything like that, but a lot of people did pick it up and sent me a lot of kind messages. I also did get a little bit of negative messages from it, which was interesting. Um, but it was one of those things that was a really cool experience, and I'm sort of taking what I've learned from that, and then I'm putting that into the book that I have now, which is complete. I'm just kind of trying to sit on it and figure out which day exactly I want to drop it. But it's been cool going from poetry to then writing like an actual novel, um, which is still pretty self-reflective. Like, it's not an autobiography by any means, but it takes a lot of life experiences that I had in what I would call the first half of my life. Because being 31, I'm like, okay, I'm had these first 30 years. Let's try to put that into something, and that's kind of what this book, which is called Focus Puller, is kind of about right now. So yeah, so it's been interesting because it's a totally different medium. It's so unlike film in a lot of ways. I mean, there's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of differences. And it's a totally different industry. It's a totally different like system of working. So it's been cool kind of dipping my toe into that, which is, like I said, where the roots of all the creativity really started from. Because I never thought I would be writing screenplays or anything like that. I kind of always saw the poetry and the books avenue first, but always saw the potential to do more in film, and that's sort of what kind of led me into that as my like major of study in college and everything.
Well, that's awesome. And believe me, there's always going to be the haters. You said you got some
Yeah.
negative comments. They're going to be out there. Don't beat yourself up over that. I say concentrate on the good responses you got, because
Mm-hmm.
those are mostly the most authentic ones. Um,
Exactly.
but yeah, no. And you said you could pick this up on Amazon, your first book.
Yep. So it's called Just a Boy Blaming Himself. And yeah, it's available on Amazon, either Kindle, like ebook, or just paperback, and everything like that. And I was able to get it. It's not as wide reaching, but about like 13 indie bookstores across the country at one time were carrying the book, which is really cool, to see it like physically in stores and stuff like that. So, if you're an indie bookstore person, it might be in your area. Like I said, no guarantees, but it was around, like I said, I think 13 or 15 indie bookstores across the US were carrying it at one time, which is cool.
Have you ever been kind of like shocked or like been in that surreal moment where like you're holding your book and you're like, oh man, I wrote this? Like, like physically, this is something I created. Has
Yeah, I
it ever
mean,
hit you?
I definitely had that last summer because I went on, with things finally chilling out a little bit with the pandemic. I went on a vacation last summer through like Washington State and like Northern California, kind of just driving around. And there's a bookstore out there in Washington that had the book in it. And I went to that store and signed copies and everything. And it was just, yeah, it was really weird because I'm just like, I'm in Washington State, about as far away from Baltimore as you can be, and here's my book. And they had like 5 or 6 copies of it, and I was just signing copies of these books, and they were putting them back on the shelf and everything. And yeah, I was like, never ever would have guessed that would be a thing, but here we were with it. So yeah, it was definitely a surreal but like really fun moment to kind of see that happen, because yeah, I never would have guessed that like this book I just plopped on the internet would somehow make it to any bookstores at all.
Yeah, no. It sounds like it would be a really surreal moment for me. Like
Mhm.
I would like have to take pictures with my book and like
Yeah, right.
sign a couple. I'd go up to like the clerk. I'm like, hey, that's me. That's me.
Right. Like, here I am, this is the book.
Yeah, you're welcome. I came. This is my book.
Yep. Exactly.
um, well, I know, like you said, you do a lot of writing and you take inspiration from your life. Uh, and when you're thinking of like concepts for films, do the ideas just kind of come to you, or are you out, eating a burger one day and like you see something, you're like, that would make a really good story or like film? Where do you get some of your inspiration in on a day-to-day basis?
So I'd like to think of it as like, you can tell you're really passionate about something when you almost become like an encyclopedia in a way. And this is kind of like a thought that I've had been having the last few weeks actually, where it's just like, people who love to just write traditionally, it's like you're always reading and you're always consuming material. But for me, it's like that's my version, but with film. And it's just like as much as I can, I'm constantly like researching, watching film, rewatching films, and I'm just trying to remember different elements from things. And it'll be interesting that I'll have conversations with people and they'll talk about like either a concept or we'll be talking over a concept. And then I'll be like, oh, well, this is like, this movie with a little bit of that movie and then just a little bit of this movie. And then here we go. You put them all into like a blender and that's sort of what you get. So like for me, that's kind of where I get a lot of my inspiration for films from, is just like remembering, okay, well, this movie was really cool, like because they had these really awesome action scenes. But then this other movie was awesome because it had these like cool horror elements in them. How about we put the two together and see if we can like make a story like that, like an action horror thing. So like that's how I always try to approach it, is like, how can I either like mishmash things and still somehow make it a cohesive story, or I can take elements from all these things and sort of like just pepper them in enough where it's like, okay, this is still considered like a drama, but it also has like some mystery thriller elements to it at the same time. And it just spices it up a little bit. And then the characters. So for me, it's like, I always want to look at characters that come from different walks of life and that just have interesting perspectives on things. I'm not trying to write a story about, like, no offense, but just about a bunch of like white guys in a mall or something. It's like there's stories that can be told, sure, but they're not the things that interest me as a writer. So I'm always trying to look at like different cultures, different backgrounds, different like mythologies from those places, and just find these like kind of interesting ways to tell stories that might have been told before, but with a perspective that, no one has really experienced through either in like an indie film or in like a more Hollywood centric made type of film. So that's what I try to do. I'm just always trying to like find weird things and put them all together. And, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I'm always trying to just experiment with it because otherwise for me, it just gets kind of boring. And if I get bored with something, I know myself well enough that I'm like, I will just kind of stop or walk away from it. So yeah, so I'm always just anything that can be weird and interesting that I can just throw into a huge blender. That's my thought process for filmmaking. But I wish it was like these aha moments, but that's usually I never really get those, honestly.
Sometimes I do wish myself that they were the aha moments to like I had an epiphany and
Uh-huh.
this is now my goal to create this vision I had. It's never like that for me. It's
No,
like,
yeah, it's not like I'm just like boom, and then it's like, whoa, the whole movie's done. I just have to type it now.
yeah, no, like most of my ideas that like I've been writing and doing stuff have been me spitballing ideas back and forth with my fiance. I'll be like,
Hmm.
it'd be really crazy if a situation like this happened, and then she makes it like even crazier, and then I make it
Right.
a little crazier, and then it just goes back and forth until we have what seems like a concept for like an entire film. And then I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
we gotta get this on paper now. Like, let's go. We can do this. And
Exactly.
yeah, and I appreciate the diversity that you want to create within the films. Like it does get a little boring if like everyone is just the same. Like it's the same
Yeah.
character copy and pasted a bunch of times into the movie. It gets a little boring. So the diversity I think is important, and I appreciate the attempt at diversity. You know,
Yeah. I mean, when I had gotten my senior thesis film was, it was back in 2012, and it was a very LGBT focused film about two women kind of finding love in this world where nobody had a voice, and it was like a really cool concept, and that was the like cool traction that I had going into like the real world. Um, but that was the kind of stuff that I found that like was interesting to me. I just wanted to kind of find those voices out there in the world, and try to tell those stories. um, so that's always been the mission and everything, because I think most people it's just like, especially in college, I just remember a lot of like, it's this crazy party and like everything just gets crazy, and it's just like, dude, really? Like, when you're a kid, especially in college, it's like that was always the short films that you would see, is just like, man, it's like The Hangover, but like a college party and stuff like that. It's just like, come on, man, get out of here. Like we can do better than that.
it's really people just living vicariously through their films. They're like, I never had that crazy party, so let's film a crazy party. It's like,
Uh
yeah,
huh.
no, man, come on. Like
Yeah,
how the early 2000s and the late 90s were filled with those films. Like it's been done. It's over. But
exactly.
yeah, no. But so you are a filmmaker and you are from Baltimore, correct? You're from Baltimore?
Yep. Born and
Um,
raised.
awesome. What's being part of the industry there? Because I don't know if there a lot of infrastructure for the film industry. Like, is there a lot of people who are in the industry there where it's easy to go like, hey, I'm looking for characters in a new film, and then like people just start popping up, or is it something that you have to kind of work a little more on because you're not in one of those New York, like Atlanta, Los Angeles, Hollywood, anything like that?
Yeah, I'd definitely say. I mean, we've had our ebbs and our flows with it here in Baltimore. Like when we had The Wire, it was really good, the industry, and then we had that nice little pop in like the late, or I'd say like the early 2010s when we had like House of Cards was here for a while, and also Veep was here for a while. But then they kind of took away the incentives, and so now it's kind of back to that lull of just like, there's just not a lot that's being done here. Every now and again, like I think they filmed like there's like a Charm City movie that came out a few years that was like Will Smith's like production company helped finance. I think that was about like 4 or 5 years ago. So yeah, there's been little things that have come through, but nothing really big anymore. So it's just like we have Facebook groups and stuff like that, but the talent pool and things like that, it's not anywhere close to where like in Atlanta or in LA or New York would be right now. So it's sort of kind of there, but yeah, it's mainly like really what we have a lot here is, there's a lot of like nonprofit video work and there's a lot of like political video work with being so close to DC and stuff like that. So yeah, in that field, and then even like there's some pretty good documentary work that does happen here as well. But creative like live action feature filmmaking, not really much going on with that at the moment right now. Um, so it's one of those things where it's like, if anything was to happen, it's just like a lot of things would have to be brought into the area as far as like talent and resources and maybe a little bit of crew. We do have some good like DPs and we do have some good like rental houses here locally. But for like the big real deal stuff, yeah, you're going to be pretty much bringing a lot of stuff into the area if you wanted to film here, kind of deal.
That's why I kind of had like my suspicion that that's how it was gonna be. Um,
Hmm.
like Miami, major city, no infrastructure for film, right?
Yeah.
It's there are Facebook groups, like you said, there are groups, there are like some production houses and stuff, and there are some good rental stuff, but it's not film. It's like a lot of commercials and advertisement work, because Miami's a
Hmm.
beautiful area. Um, there's a lot of social media stuff, so you'll get a lot of work for people who have YouTube channels and there's a giant influx right now of professionals who have YouTube channels. Like there's financial professionals who have YouTube channels. I've seen a lot of
Hmm.
like plastic surgery professionals that have YouTube channels and stuff like that. Just a lot of professionals who've done their time in school and now want to like move their way online on social media. But film isn't really big, which I think it could very well be big, but it's not something that the groundwork has been laid for. And not to say that there's not good filmmakers here.
Oh yeah.
There's great filmmakers, great short filmmakers, features. They're making features, short films, all that. It's just the industry hasn't moved to that side, to the artistic side yet. And
Yeah.
I was guessing because there's very limited places that actually have that infrastructure set.
Hmm.
When you are looking to, like, let's say, how easy is it to find like a spot to film in Baltimore? Like, if you went into a a small restaurant and you were like, hey, could we shoot a film here? What's more likely than not to be the reaction?
I think given that not it's one of those things that's interesting. I feel like it would either be a straight up like quick no, or it would be like, oh wow, you're doing a film that's really cool. Sure. Kind of like attitude. I don't think you would get anything in between. I think it would either be like a very like happy yes, because they'd be like, this is interesting, or just a strict like no way, because it happens so infrequently that yeah, it would just be one of those deals. So that's how I think it would go down. You'd either be like sure thing or just no, get out of my restaurant.
Yeah, because in, like, let's say LA, um, those restaurants, like, they a lot of them already have like pre-written contracts. Like, if someone wants to film there, they'll be like, oh, we have this, and then
Hmm.
you have to read it over. It has to be between a certain time and a certain time, and you got to put a down payment of this. And a lot of people, like restaurants, they'll actually have like signs that say no filming,
Yeah.
because they already know how things are over there. But in over here in Miami, like you said, there's like, it'll be like a quick no, because they're like, no, we've never been part of anything like that before, or like they'll be interested and they'll probably give a go ahead. Um, I've also never been to Baltimore, so just giving the heads up. Is it like I'm guessing it's a landlocked city, right?
Well, we have the bay like that's around us and everything, and then we have
Yeah.
like the inner harbor right there. So we're like we're right on the water and everything like that. With it.
Oh, my geography's horrible.
No, it's okay. I've only been to Miami once. It was really cool, but yeah, I mean it's like totally different vibe. It's much more colorful than Baltimore is. I'll say that much.
it's
Um
it could be a little too colorful sometimes.
yeah, a little bit, but it's still it's a cool city, and it's interesting because there was that little bit of pop I think in the '90s with Miami as a filming location because I think you had the original Ace Ventura was filmed in Miami. There's a couple things in like the early to mid '90s that were filmed in Miami, and then I think they did the same thing Baltimore did, which was like they sort of took away the incentives or something like that, and then next thing you know, they really weren't doing many productions again. And that's really what it was because I think Atlanta got as big as it did because they just really opened the floodgates for their like incentives in that state, in that city, especially. And then next thing you know, it was like I knew so many people from Baltimore that went to Atlanta, because it was like if you're not like LA is just like that's that huge step, and if you're kind of
Yeah.
like not ready to make the dive into the crazy world of LA, it was like Atlanta was that first kind of stepping stone. So yeah, and that like around like 2014, 2015, I just kept seeing like so many people I knew that were still in the industry going to that Atlanta area. And I think that's what happened is like a lot of the people either on the East Coast or like Midwest all sort of like migrated there. And so that hasn't helped things either because I just feel like a lot of people just went to that Atlanta area to try to keep going with the careers and stuff like that.
Yeah, they're saying that Atlanta is the Hollywood of the East, because if you go there, you do get like they're like if you're part like you gotta apply, of course, but um you get some tax cuts and some tax breaks, and you get some funding from the state because they're trying to up their artistic value of like of Atlanta and of Georgia.
Hmm.
Florida had certain of those incentives, like you said, and we did like Ace Ventura, and it popped for a little bit with Burn Notice. I don't know if you ever heard of that show. There was a show
Yep,
called Burn Notice, and Bad Boys and stuff like that.
that's right. Yep.
But after that, they did take away the incentives. Like you don't have as many tax breaks and cuts, and then everything's so pricey in Miami that you need those breaks to be able to afford certain things, and it kind of like dwindled up. It stayed with commercials and stuff, but and it stayed with like social media. But yeah,
Hmm.
I you know because I've seen The Wire, and I know and
Yeah, I was gonna say when it's usually that's the thing. When you say Baltimore, everybody's like The Wire, and it's like,
that's my
yeah.
introduction to Baltimore, honestly.
Which isn't always the greatest thing, but it's like, yeah, we have a little bit more to offer than The Wire, but I totally get why that's the thing that sort of is what people think of because that has been one of the biggest exports from Baltimore to kind of come out of the city that has, Baltimore. That's the thing with like um, House of Cards is like it's very DC based, so it's like people don't really think, but a lot of that was actually filmed in Baltimore proper. And then same thing with like Veep, but Veep was more like in studio type of stuff. So yeah, we haven't had really like a calling card since The Wire, which, like I said, is definitely a hit or miss thing. Because
And, like,
I've had, yeah, they're like, is it going to be like The Wire when I go in the city? And it's like, no, we're not just it's not crime, just showering throughout the city. We're actually a pretty chill city. But yeah,
yeah, like those other shows, they were part of Baltimore, but like The Wire was like openly Baltimore, like
yep.
like every episode, like they say Baltimore like at least 20 times, and that's so you're like, okay, this is Baltimore.
Hmm.
And there was a part of me that like kind of like thought it would be funny in my head that like I go to Baltimore, I'm like, oh no, this is just riddled with crime. The Wire was right.
I mean, there are certain areas of Baltimore that you don't go to that aren't too dissimilar, but for the most part, if you're just, going to like the harbor or the little like shops in Baltimore and stuff, you're totally okay. But yes, that I won't sugarcoat that either. There definitely are areas where it's a little bit sketchy. But yeah, you don't really get to those areas unless you're really, really trying to. And then at that point, you're the one doing that. Nobody
Yeah.
else is saying,
That's
"Hey,
on you.
go down to West Baltimore and have fun."
Yeah, that one's on you.
Uh
Yeah.
huh.
No, it's the same thing with Miami. People have this like vision of Miami in their head, like, beaches and clubs and like Always Sunny. It's like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
those are some things, but like any major city, we got our crime, we got our like craziness, and it's freaking hot over here all the time. And so like
It's the
you got the
humidity.
beauty, but you gotta take the good with the bad. Oh, it's the humidity, man. The humidity's just got off.
Uh-huh.
I was in Vegas not too long ago with my fiance and some friends, and um over there it's hot, but it's a dry heat,
Yep.
and then I came back here and you can feel the little humidity bubbles like hitting you, and you're just like, it's driving me crazy. Like
It's like breathing. It's like breathing through like a mask. It's like breathing through like three masks actually. But
I'm
yeah,
getting
it's like
waterboarded. I'm getting waterboarded by nature, like the little
exactly.
water droplets going into my lungs. But yeah, no. But I would always love to go. I'm a big traveler. I love seeing new places and traveling new places, and uh that area like Baltimore, DC, I want to go like northeast and stuff,
Hmm.
have always like interested me. So I might end up in your city one day.
I was
I
gonna
don't
say,
know.
just let me know. I'll show you the cool spots.
Hell yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Uh-huh. That's the way you got to do it. You got to just find people in each state, and then when you travel, you just always have like a tour guide.
That's true. Yeah, no, like it's so much harder like planning a trip by yourself,
Hmm.
like finding somewhere new. And then like when I went up to Atlanta with my friends, we actually decided that day that we were going to go to Atlanta. Like we're from Miami, and then my friend got his final paycheck for one of his jobs, and he was
Nice.
like, let's go, I'll fund the trip to Atlanta. And I was like, I called out of work and I'm like, I'm sick. And then they're like,
Uh-huh.
okay. I'm like, I'm gonna be sick all weekend. I'm really sick. And then like we went, we just drove all the way to Atlanta that night. And when we
Wow.
got there, we were like, what's there to do? Like, what's there to do? Like, I have no
Uh-huh.
idea. So we ended up looking up a local show because we're really into music. So we found a local band that was playing a local show. And then the
Nice.
next day I went with a hangover to get my first tattoo ever in Atlanta. And that's how
There you
it
go.
started. But it would have been much easier if we had someone on the inside.
Yeah, they would have just been able to say like, "Oh, this is going to happen at this time, and this spot has really good like chicken or something like that." All those little like
Wings.
tidbits. Yeah, right.
Yeah. But next time I'm gonna be a little more prepared because I do want to go back to Atlanta. But they have
Yeah.
like a really poppin' film scene, and I do want to go visit some stuff up there. But I'll be more prepared that time next time. Um,
Sounds good.
when you're filming, what do you find is like the biggest obstacle for yourself? It could be the city, it could be working with certain people. What do you think holds the production back the most sometimes?
I mean, I think it is. I think sometimes it can be the people. I remember a really good situation one time where I was doing a music video and we had a game plan. It was a really cool concept because it was like right around the time when oh gosh, what's that? There's that video game that came out where it was like you had to go and you were like the assassin and it was like top down and you had to like take everyone out in the different floors. Um,
I
and I
know I
forget.
know what you're talking about,
Yeah,
but I
yeah,
can't
yeah,
remember the
but I
name. Yeah.
forget what it was called. But we kind of took inspiration from that, and it was like this very action-oriented music video for this like metal band. And we found these like choreographers that had come up from like more of the DC area, and they were helping us kind of like do all the action. We had all the cool props and everything, and they were like immediately questioning the way we were like filming it, which was just like really like, okay, like we are filming it, like we know how to film this, like we've done this before, but they were like thinking that you needed to film action a very certain way. And so then they started like telling the band, like, hey, we don't think these guys are filming this music video right. And then next thing you know, like the lead guy from the band is like pulling me aside and he's like, hey, they're saying you're not filming this right. Like, what's going on? And the project literally fell apart. Like, it completely fizzled apart because they just were so insistent that we like didn't know what we were doing when we just had a different approach to how we were filming it. We were doing a lot of different like angles, a lot of different takes, and we were just gonna all like cut it together. But in their mind, it was supposed to be this like just film it and that's it. And it was just like the total opposite of what you really should be doing with an action scene anyway. It's like when you watch John Wick, are they just standing with one shot the whole time? Like, no, they're cutting between 800 angles, and that's what takes action films so long to make, because you're doing the same thing from like 20 different perspectives and then slapping it all together. So yeah, so the project completely fell apart, which sucked at the time because like it was something that we were all really excited about. I'd spent like a pretty good amount of money from the budget on everything, which like luckily the band didn't make me like have to pay back, which was cool. But I didn't make anything off of that video as a result of all that. And then we didn't have a finished product. So it was like one of those things where I still to this day I think about it and I'm just like, man, like we got some really cool stuff in the can and we were like moving really well. But then yeah, just egos and personalities got involved, and it just kind of like took everything apart and kind of ruined the whole shoot.
That's so disheartening, man. Like
Yeah,
that's such a shame. That's horrible to hear.
I mean,
Uh,
yeah, it's just that's why it's just you really gotta be careful of like who you're trying to bring out on projects and stuff like that, because I had a lot of conversations with that group and they seemed like the right fit, and then just got onto set and just something like totally changed with the way they were like acting, which was just crazy. So yeah, so it is important to like obviously vet everybody that you're trying to work with, but then also kind of be prepared, because I wasn't prepared for that. I didn't think anything like that could have even happened, and it was a good like lesson to be learned, that that is kind of what you're doing on set, like especially as a producer, is like you're the one who has to rein everything in. And even when moments like that happen, you have to be like ready to, act in a certain way. Like I had a really good chat with the producer a few weeks ago, and he was telling me about how he had like this actor that was just, or no, it was a DP. He was like, I had this DP, and he was just like, look, like I need to get this shot this way, or else like I'm not going to do it. And he was like, well, if you want that shot, that's going to cost this amount of money. And we're taking that out of what we're paying you because, you want this shot so bad in this exact way. And like, that was the only way to like temper that, is like, you had to kind of be kind of a jerk, but you had to also show that like, hey, like we get that, like you want to do things a certain way, but this is kind of our rodeo too at the same time. And, we have to meet in the middle here, because if you want to do it your way, it is going to cost like an exorbitant amount of money, but you have to realize that like that's going to have to come out from what we're going to have to put out for you, because we do have a limited budget here and stuff like that. So it's you're walking on eggshells a lot of the time. It's worth it in the end, but in those situations it can get a little hairy, but that's just a part of how it can go sometimes, unfortunately.
yeah, it truly is, honestly. And it's just about people kind of not knowing their craft, or thinking that they have more information on a certain craft than you do.
Hmm.
Their job wasn't to come in and film or direct or anything like that. It was to choreograph,
Yep.
And it's such a shame when something like that happens, because unfortunately there are a lot of people out there who have a very large ego, and they want to see things turn out their way. And like you were saying, like you gotta sometimes be a little stern. You gotta be a little forward with the situation. It's like, if you do, like the DP wanted that shot, if you think it's worth it that much, you kind of have to put the money up for it,
Hmm.
because like maybe it'll be worth it, and then we're all good. But if not, it comes out of your pay,
Yeah,
because
because it's like you could say all that, and then it's like you don't even use that shot, and it's like, oh crap, we just spent 5K on this one shot that we're not even going to use. Like that was 5K that could have gone to a lot of different things, especially when you're on an indie film like that.
exactly. No, I completely agree.
Yeah.
But it's crazy. That's how things are. Everyone's trying to run their own race at the end of the day, and
Hmm.
um, some people's egos need to be a little reeled in. But it's the industry we're in. It's the artistic industry. Everyone has a different vision at the end of the day. No two
Exactly.
visions could be exactly the same. But it's awesome that you went from pharmacology, you know, to being in the industry that you love. Even when it's not the most ideal situation, sometimes it's still in the same ballpark as the industry that you love, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I try to get into people's like, minds with this podcast is that it doesn't matter like, where you are when you start. It doesn't matter, any of that. It's kind of just where you push yourself to be, because
Yes.
I was in computer science, you were in pharmacology. We're no longer in those fields. We're in the fields that we want to be. uh
Mm-hmm.
there's people who don't even go to school, who they just have a passion for it and they let it grow, and they do all of their own, like studying and everything like that, and then they build it into something that they love. There's people who were hobbyist photographers that now have their own companies and they're doing super well. Writers who they didn't go to school for writing, they went to school for finance, and
Yep.
then now they're authors. And it's just about what you love and where you're going to push yourself, guys. uh and I can't stress it enough that you should go for it. I'm not saying to quit your job today and be like, I'm a filmmaker now.
Uh-huh.
That's yeah, that's not what
That's
Daniel and I are saying.
yep.
It's about uh it's about learning your craft and putting time and effort towards what you want. So you work at a bank, that's super dope. Stick with that and really figure out where you want to go and what time and effort you want to put into it. You know, and then guaranteed you're gonna get to somewhere where you can look back and be like, I did this, I followed my dream, and you can be a great example for others who are in the same struggle. Because a lot of people, Daniel, they get scared about, oh, if I don't go to school, get a bachelor's for this, because all these job listings for an editor say they want someone with a bachelor's,
Mm-hmm.
or if I don't get backed by a studio or get a studio job, I can never really truly be a filmmaker. And that's not what it's about. You don't need the big money. The big money's nice, but you don't need the big money
Uh-huh.
to make what you love. And I can imagine that you agree with that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think a lot of people get caught, and I wouldn't call them scams necessarily, but I think a lot of people get caught in this like loop of, well, I need to learn these things, so I need to look at this program that is not really a degree, but it costs like $500 to sit and like listen to this person chat about things and stuff like that. And it's just like, you know, honestly, like, sure, those things have insight and there is some value to that. If you have a lot of money in the bank and you want to put out $500 to listen to somebody chat about stuff, go for it 110%. But if you're trying to just kind of get into the industry and stuff like that, like that's the part that, again, it goes back to, it's all about doing it, experiencing it, and putting the time into it. Because no matter what you do, like sitting in front of a screen and just watching somebody chat about it will give you insights, but it's not going to give you the practicality of it all. I wouldn't be in this position that I am at this point, like having a potential 2 feature films getting closer to production, if it wasn't for endless emails and endless outreach to producers and people that, you could sit there and tell yourself like, oh, this isn't even worth it to try to do outreach to this person because they're at this level and I'm at that level. But you just do it. Like that's the whole thing. It's the simplest answer, but it's the thing I think people have the hardest time with. And like just the other day, I was sitting in on a Zoom like interview with Team Radio Silence, who are the people who just did the most recent like Scream film. And one of the members of that, they never went to film school. And the whole reason they call themselves Radio Silence is because when they were doing their outreach at the beginning of their careers, they would reach out to people and they would get back radio silence. So that's why they called themselves that. But that's what it is like, that is what you're going to be dealing with. And there's no amount of like books, there's no amount of things you can watch that are going to prepare you for that or get you into that zone. But when you're doing it and you're out in the field, like you learn so much more. Even the rejections that I've gotten over the last year and a half have been amazing because most people will still take the time to say, hey, this is why I didn't really like gel with what you're doing. And this is what you might want to consider like going forward. And it's just those little things that just kind of like snowball into bigger stuff. And as long as you're listening and taking all of it in, like that's what's going to make your career a success. It's when you're just kind of like doing that and somebody says no, and you're just like, well, that's because they didn't get my art, or that's because they didn't understand my voice. It's like, yes, there's probably a tinge of that, but I guarantee you the other 99% is because you're not doing something the correct way. And you really should tell yourself, like, maybe I do need to tweak this, or maybe my pitch does need to be changed a little bit to encapsulate this or say that. And just stuff like that. That's the part that I think is the difference maker for what makes like a successful career and a not so successful career. Because you just have to roll with it, you know? If you're not, then you're going to get kind of either left in the dust or you're going to stagnate with whatever you're trying to do. And I hate to see it. Like that's the whole thing is like I always try to be honest with people too, because like I want everybody to succeed and I don't want anybody to flounder in what they're doing. And yeah, it's just but that's the difference is like you just have to do the outreach and have an open mind and realize that like even if you feel 100% confident in a story or in something you made, there's probably always going to be something that can be tweaked a little bit. Because I always like to say, like, even Christopher Nolan, Steven Spielberg, I guarantee you they watch every movie they've ever made and they can point to 800 different ways that they would probably do it differently if they had this or that, or, you know, that's just the nature of the industry. You know, no matter what level you get to, you're always going to say, man, if I had another like $1 million, I could have done this. Or if I had another like 3 days to film with this person, we could have made this scene happen and it would have been a little bit better. It's just like that's just the way it's going to always be. But that's what makes those people great is because they can see that and they are trying to always like improve themselves.
Well, guys, I could not have said it better myself, Daniel. Uh, I honestly think that was one of the most inspirational little speeches I've had on this show yet. So I truly
Thank
do
you.
appreciate the words of wisdom. It's honestly so true, and you just gotta keep pushing. It's a numbers game. You
Yep.
gotta keep going and going and going, and you're gonna reach that break, and then it's gonna be all worth it. You know, um, but like I said, couldn't have said better myself. Great words of wisdom. Um, uh, Daniel, is there anything that you want to go ahead and you want to plug? Any projects coming up that people should be looking out for? Anything that you want to go ahead and let them know that they should check out?
Yeah, I mean, the obviously the book coming out at some point, hopefully in the early summer, Focus Puller. That'll be available on Amazon and should be in some bookstores, just like the last book. And then, yeah, hopefully these projects will get off the ground and have some updates from there soon. But you can always just go to the website twotonyproductions.com and just check it out because I'm always posting updates and stuff. And I even have a pretty active blog where I'm openly taking like indie film submissions from people and stuff to feature. So if anybody out there listening has a project or anything they want to try to get some traction or media for, I'm always happy to chat. There's like email submissions on the website and stuff like that. So anyway, I can be a resource for people in the indie film world or in the indie like writing world. I'm always happy to kind of share my limited insights of what I've been through over the last few years. To help anybody out.
Well, perfect. Guys, make sure to go ahead and check out Two Tony. Make sure to go ahead and check out Daniel's Instagram and all his sites. I'm gonna have all the links in the description below. I also know that Daniel has a podcast, right? And
Yep.
I'm gonna go ahead and leave a link for that as well. Daniel, shout out your podcast.
Yeah. So Filmmaker of the Week is the podcast and everything. Do cool sit downs with different filmmakers from all over the world, everywhere from here in the States to Australia to Europe, everywhere. So it's a fun time and there's just a lot of cool insight from different people's careers of all different levels.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna leave all the descriptions below, guys. I'm gonna leave the podcast, his Instagram, the site for Two Tony. I'm going to also leave a link for his book, his poetry book. So go ahead and check those out. Give some love to Daniel. He's working hard out here in Baltimore. not here. He's working hard out there in Baltimore,
out in the space.
out in the world. He's putting in that work, and honestly, he's doing a hell of a job. He gave one of the most inspirational speeches I've had on this show, and I can only appreciate it. But remember, guys, go for what you love.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, you're gonna look back and you're gonna regret, and you shouldn't live your life with what ifs.
Exactly.
Just go for it, and there's not one set path. If you think you've missed your shot because of your age, because of your social status, because of your financial situation, you haven't. There's tons of ways to make your dreams come true and to make your goals actually come to fruition. And that's what we really try to hammer in with this podcast. Daniel, I want to thank you for joining me on the show today. I really do appreciate it. I love our conversation, and I think I've had a great time.
Yeah, same here. I really appreciate you having me on, and it's been a complete pleasure all the way around.
Thank you. Well, guys, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Creators Anonymous. Have a wonderful day. Bye.